Latvia Weekly, your independent guide to the news in Latvia, with your hosts, Otto Tabuns and Joe Horgan. Latvia NBCM, and welcome to episode number 87 of the Latvia Weekly podcast. I am Joe Horgan, seated next to Otto Tabuns here in Jelgava as we are sipping away at some delicious decaf coffee. How are you today, Otto?
Oh, hello everyone. I'm very happy to enjoy the wonderful decaf that you have made for me.
And for those of you from America who are fans of decaf, because in America, you can actually go into almost any Dunkin' Donuts, any Starbucks, any kind of coffee place and ask for decaf. Here in Latvia, if you go into a cafe and ask for decaf, people are going to look at you like you have three heads. But for those of you who are decaf fans here in Latvia, I can recommend, they are not a sponsor, certainly not, but there is some very cheap, decent decaf at Rimi that you can get. They're in these like little blue packages. So if you are decaf fans like Otto and I, but just because we are drinking decaf right now does not mean that this was a slow news week or one that is going to put you to sleep. This was one where we actually had to cut a couple of stories that we wanted to talk about because there is so much to do.
Probably one of the reasons why we have to avoid caffeine this week.
Yes, exactly. Also aside from my heart troubles and stuff like that. But anyway, so for those of you who were listening last week, we had this story which a couple days later turned out, I got a bunch of messages, I got a bunch of kind of like, oh, Joe, you jinxed it, why did you do this? Because we were talking about how there was a minor little blip, because here in Latvia with the COVID-19 crisis, we had a very, very long stretch where we had basically just 0 case, 1 case, 0 case, 2 cases, 0 cases. And last time I talked, I was kind of making a little joke how, the amount of cases tripled from the day before, because when we were last speaking about a week ago, we had 3 cases, and the day before it was just 1. And I said, well, I'll only be really worried if it goes up to 6 or 9 the next day and it keeps going up. Well, the very next day, there were 7 cases. And then the day after that, there were 7 cases. And the day after that, there were 13 cases. And yeah, so a bunch of you wrote to me like, way to go, Joe, joking about this. Well, I wasn't joking in the first place, it was just, but we were very worried here for a minute, and the ministry, the ministries got together and they did come up with one kind of new measure that they re-implemented about cafes, so that you can't have more than 4 people at a table in a cafe inside if you're not from the same family. And there was talk that today, so we're recording this Tuesday morning, that today there could be new restrictions implemented. But luckily, the next day there was 11 cases, then 8, then 0, then 1. And now today it was just announced a few minutes ago, because we're recording this about 11 in the morning, and they mentioned this kind of in the late morning, the new amounts of cases from the day before. There were 0 cases. So instead of looking like a spike, this looks a little bit more like a blip, I would say. So this is not, I don't know if I should call this a false alarm, because, there was an increase in cases, and this does show that we still have to be careful, that we still, shouldn't, pretend that nothing's happening and, completely throw caution to the wind. But it is kind of a sober reminder, and people were getting a little bit nervous, but it looks like so far the coast is clear. What's your take on this, Otto?
Well, exactly. All in all, the situation is still better than in most other countries. At the same time, we have to keep our guard up, especially if now before the restrictions were lifted, people were getting together, and we know at least 2 of the cases were in context of 2 specific restaurants, where like some parties that went there and got some meals together, then afterwards all became infected with the virus. So we have to still be careful, as the danger has not passed yet.
Yeah, exactly. And I do want to just mention, because there is, from other countries in the world, specifically my home country, there is this idea that's floating around that, well, the reason why there are no new cases in countries like Latvia is because there weren't, there's not enough tests. Well, let me put it this way. Yesterday, according to the official statistics, you can find this on LSM. You can also find this from SPKC, the Latvian Center for Disease Control. There was 2,135 tests, and 0 of those came up positive. Okay, so that's a pretty huge difference compared to Florida right now in the United States, where there's something like 60,000 tests, and then 20,000 of them come up positive. So it's not like we're not doing any tests or anything like that. So please, don't go with that line of thinking, because that's just not the case at all. But we do have some other kind of COVID-related things to discuss because, again, this is not over. I mean, especially, in other countries in the world, specifically the United States, this is something that's raging very badly. And although here in Latvia we have a handle on this for now, we've seen in other countries and other states, places where it looked like that it was gone for good, that it came back stronger than ever before. So there are new, more stringent information gathering measures that have been put on incoming visitors and some coordination with the Baltic states, from what I understand, Otto.
Apparently, they are considering something that already was put in place in Poland. For example, I remember when I had to go on a business trip in February, at the end of February, when all of this started in this part of the world. When we were in the planes, we had to fill in forms about our intentions for travel, about like when we plan to leave, or in which countries we have been before, and also our contact information. So in case that we, or let's say the people who have been sitting next to us, have been actually infected with the virus, it would be easier to contain it, at least by the way of being able to contact these people and telling them either like to stay home or like to seek doctor's help or something else. And this was something that was not really put in place in the Baltic states. Also, when the people and the Latvian and the other Baltic citizens from other countries returned back to their homelands. But looking at this spike that Joe just mentioned, probably this will now be the case. Not to say that some like more travel restrictions would be in place, but just that you will have like more bureaucracy, more forms, so that the government would have a better understanding of who is coming in, and if there has been this another spike, so that it would be easier to pin where the source is in that case.
And definitely, just keep your ears to the ground. I mean, great resource is the English version of LSM, because, they are connected with the government institutions. They are not Latvian state media. When you see LSM, you might think Latvian state media, because but it's Latvia Sabiedrisko media, which is public media in English. So they are not just like a state department or something like that. There's something more like PBS or BBC. But we will not get into their funding structure right now. That would be a whole long debate. But anyway, just keep an eye on there, especially if you're here in Latvia and you want to know what the latest restrictions are and the latest numbers. But one of the big debates that's raging right now, everywhere in the world, we've seen a lot in America, for those of you who are connected with America, and we're seeing it here in Latvia, is the question of what to do about school. And right now, there was a announcement this week by the Minister of Health that apparently the plan is to open up school in September. Now, of course, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? Because, really, it was just as of the day before they shut down, in-person classes and went to distance learning. There was really no obvious word that was going to happen, and then suddenly it just happened like that. So who knows what's actually going to happen, especially if there's another blip or spike or anything like that. But that is the plan right now, and there are people discussing the merits of whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. What do you see, Otto? Do you actually see schools opening as they were this time last year in September?
Well, currently, I would say that that's highly likely. At the same time, I know that most schools and also institutions of higher education would be ready to, at least for the first semester, to do it from a distance learning away. I know that at least the school that I'm working for, the Graduate School of Law, is ready to do that. as it could also be the case that there may be some implications for international students. But for the general public education, especially the one that is provided by the state, if the statistics keeps as calm as it seems to be right now, I think we'll be able to go back to school, at least in the case of the Jelgava Speedwell State High School that we are both associated with. Probably we'll have the chance to celebrate the 1st of September right there as usual, outdoors by the Museum of Jelgava.
I certainly hope so, although there will probably be some distancing measures there because I really miss going to school, believe it or not. And it's actually funny. I do hear from different students or just like kids that my daughter plays with on the playground. That they want to go back to school. They actually miss school. So there is the stereotype that all kids are happy and glad that they're not in school, but it's not always the case. But one much more controversial aspect about opening up school this year is a proposed change to the education regulations that is being readied by the Ministry of Education and Science, which this would require students to have internet access from home and also to have a smart device. And so the reason why it's controversial, is not necessarily because of the issue of whether or not smart devices should be used in education. That is a discussion that happens, whether or not, we should use cell phones and tablets and computers in school. That's not what this is about. This is much more of an economic issue because, according to the English version of LSM, which I've been quoting a few times already this episode, there was a survey that was done by the different municipalities in cooperation with the ministry, and apparently only 52% of students throughout the country, or when I say students, I mean high school students, pupils, or younger students as well, primary school students as well. Only 52% had access to all of the required technologies, and there are quite a few students who don't have high-speed internet access or even internet access at all, stable internet access in the place they live, especially out in the countryside. And, again, there's plenty of people who, have one computer, for example, with, like 3 or 4 people in the family. So the question is, who should pay for this? And that is something that will be very expensive no matter what happens. How do you see this playing out, Otto?
Well, answering to your question, if I'm reading the Latvian constitution, then the answer should be that it is the government who would pay for that, because according to Article 12 of the constitution, education, or at least the mandatory education, should be provided for free. So in response to these plans by the Minister of Education, you already had a comment from the Ombudsman, who told that this would be unconstitutional to demand parents to buy smart devices and provide internet connection, especially for those grades, like for primary school, which is mandatory and in the constitution should be provided for free.
Yeah, and by the way, the way it works here in Latvia is that up until 9th grade is mandatory education. In America, we're used to, in most places, you can drop out when you're 16 legally, without your, but here in Latvia, it's mandatory up till 9th grade. So some people don't go on to high school, or some people go on to alternative schools, trade schools, different things like that instead. So we'll have to see those plays out. I mean, of course, we do want to have a more technologically advanced education system here in Latvia, especially, even with the new curriculum standards that are coming out, that are rolling out this September finally. There is a much higher emphasis on integrating technology into all of the subjects, but there is not a huge emphasis on paying for that technology to do that because, again, the school I teach at, we're very lucky to have quite a few computers compared to other schools, but even our school, we don't have the, required technology for that. And especially in schools further out in the countryside, there might be a smart board in the classroom, but that's not enough. It's cool. You can do cool tricks on it, but that's not going to satisfy the requirements.
Yeah. And this also goes in the context of why we discussed so much the story of the optimization of the school network, because it is not only the question of having, let's say, enough teachers for the pupils, or like enough pupils for the school to be run, but also the question of resources, so that for each school that you would have more or less equal set of resources and an equal set of equipment, so that the quality of education would be at least without the human factor the same in any school you would go to.
And from what I understand also, because I haven't done enough research on this, which I should, but from what I understand also, part of this idea of having a required smart device is also for the continuation of remote learning if that needs to happen, which could happen at any time, as we've learned, and it's something that we do need to be prepared for. So this will be interesting to see how this plays out. And also, just kind of one minor aside, one of the reasons why Latvia set up that Tava Clase program, which I don't know if any of you saw me on that, there was these two cable TV channels, and then you could also watch them on the internet later or live, was to free up a device, for people to use at home. So you could, do TV, you could do education through the TV instead of, your smart device. So that program was recognized by the OECD as one of the best educational solutions throughout the world to the COVID crisis. So good job to Latvia. So not just, that I don't want to just give the, praise to the ministry, because that was also, there was a lot of partners who were involved in that, different TV channels, different teachers all throughout the country, including myself. So I guess I can congratulate myself too. So that was definitely a successful thing. And then one other minor COVID education-related thing. So apparently, international students are going to have the ability to start the academic year online, because here in Latvia, we do have an increasing number of international students, even here in Jelgava as well. Oh, yes. So do you think that this will be a positive development?
Well, certainly it is good that most of the universities and graduate schools are ready for this. And, we have heard the story how it is happening in other countries, also in connection with the visa regulations, like with the universities that provide or do not provide the in-class teaching. So at least in our case, it will be a good solution, at least for this semester, perhaps also for this academic year. So I'm happy to see government thinking about this and finding a way for it to work out.
So moving on from education to taxes in COVID-related stories. So, the big question was going to be how much of an economic hit COVID had on the country. So not just in terms of the GDP, not just in terms of, purchases that were done, but also in tax revenues. But it looks like the shortfall in taxes is nowhere near as much as I would have expected, or I think anyone really would have expected. So it looks like it was 92.8% of the amount of expected tax revenue. Is that correct, Otto?
Yes, exactly. That has been the latest report from the State Revenue Service, and I think it is really a good number, taking into account all the ways how the economy has been affected, the way how the employers and employees have been affected, and in general, it's a good number, because you have some parts of the tax revenue that are completed above even 100%. That is possible, like with the access tax or something. If there is more activity there, you would see bigger number there, and in some others, like in the income tax, it could be lower because of these periods when some people could not work. So all in all, I think also economically we are faring better than most other countries in the world.
And not a huge surprise, the worst revenue was with the value-added tax, or as we would call it in America, sales tax. It's slightly different, but again, we're not going to get into that today, because that would be a whole nother hour of talking. So anyway, the Financial Discipline Council, so they are taking a look at the situation as they always do, and they have come out with a report saying that future budgets should not be burdened by the COVID tax or the COVID situation, because we have had quite a bit of extraordinary spending recently with the situation, but from what I understand, it hasn't really had a huge tax hit on the budget. It's mostly been bonds that were raised and were done pretty successfully. So what do you think? Is this going to have a significant impact on future budgets, these COVID measures that, some of which people might want them to become more permanent?
Well, I think that at this time, probably it's not far enough for the government to take a look at the COVID spending and at some of the positions for the extraordinary aid, because we know that in some sectors, such as in agriculture, this agricultural extraordinary aid there has been only a small proportion that had been spent so far. So it would be a question whether the unspent money should be still given to the ministry, or perhaps taken back, to spend for some other purposes, such as for the healthcare costs and other aspects, so that it is not like that. Oh, well, we have the crisis, we have the extraordinary aid, and so now here you have it, and now you spend it. I think it is, not only some basic good sense that we may come up with. I think that is also what the State Audit Office has been trying to indicate for the government.
And so if you do follow the English version of esam, there was this very dramatic headline a couple days ago: tax reform discussion hits dead end in Latvia. And if you've listened to the show, you know that this is not an unexpected headline to see, because tax reform is going to be the most difficult thing for this current government to do. And Otto and I have long been predicting, especially Otto, that once tax reform really gets going, that will most likely be the end of the current government, because generally governments here in Latvia, and when we say governments, we mean the cabinet of ministers. So we don't mean that, there's a coup and, the whole government's overthrown. No, we're talking about the ministry is reshuffled and there's a new prime minister. So generally they do not last very long in Latvia. We have never had a single prime minister last from a regularly scheduled election to another regularly scheduled election, and this is the most painful issue that will come up. But it looks like this is a little bit over dramatic, because Otto, you would not say that it has quite hit a dead end, would you?
Exactly, because although this guaranteed minimum income or the untaxed minimum is certainly an important aspect of the tax system, it is just one part of it. We already discussed that the government hopes to introduce health tax, and this seems to be going forward. I have understood that there is an agreement on this, and there are many other aspects, such as the question of the micro enterprise tax, the question of the rates of the value added tax, and many other aspects that they will have to hammer out. So I'm not sure that all of the tax reform will fail because of this one issue, but certainly, as you rightly mentioned, this will be probably the biggest issue other than COVID for this government to deal with.
One very last COVID-related thing. So around this time of year is when we start hearing about the Aglona pilgrimage over in the middle of Latvia, not far from Ārzemnieki. Aglona is like 20 kilometers from Ārzemnieki, something like that?
Yeah, it's very close, yes.
It is one of the places that Otto recommended that you visit over the summer. Again, I would not recommend visiting it during this massive pilgrimage, because I'm not a huge fan of crowds. But generally, Catholics from all over Latvia start walking through Latvia to Aglona, again, not that far from Ārzemnieki. There are big question marks over how or whether this celebration will happen, because obviously it is not very socially distanceable to have massive amounts of crowds here. So we will keep an eye on this, because it is something that does interest a lot of people. Do you see it happening this year, Otto?
Well, probably it will go in a hybrid manner. It could be the case that part of it takes place there in Aglona, because you have the basilica there. It's a major Catholic holy place. At the same time, it was possible to conduct, let's say, the Easter services partially online. So perhaps they will try to involve more of the modern technology, so that people, especially the ones who would be more vulnerable if they contracted COVID, so that they would be able to join online as they did for the Easter service.
Okay, and now I think it is time to get into some rapid fire stories. So there's quite a few, so we are going to cover them pretty quickly, not get that much into them. The first one, so this is the most classic Latvian crime that you can commit: illegal logging. So it is not very unusual that you hear about people illegally logging in different forests, state forests, private forests. It is a common crime, a common get-rich-quick scheme. But there was this German entrepreneur who apparently illegally logged 100 oak trees, and not just any oak trees, large oak trees. There's actually a word in Latvian, dižoks. No, dižoks. What am I talking about? Dižozos. That is
A Latvian English compound. So, if we ever get to, Latvish or like some kind of an other Creole language between Latin and English, this could be a very important word, remembering how important oaks are to Latvians.
Yeah, there is no word in Latvian dižoks. Dižozos, which is like great oak. And it is always a sad thing when one of these falls down. So the fact that there was 100 of these large oak trees, I don't know if all of them were technically dižozoli, but it is a not your typical logging crime here in Latvia.
Exactly, because whether it is a dižozos or a diškoks or not, you have to remember that we have a special reverence to trees, even though they cover more than half of this country. And I'm not talking only about some feelings of the Latvian people, but I'm also talking about the criminal code, because illegal logging, in the case where you would need, for example, the permission of the municipality to fell some trees, it can land you in jail for up to 2 years. So if you have a farm and you have trees there, or if you have a forest, make sure whether you don't need a permission to fell them. Otherwise, you will end up on the news and will report on you as a person who might have ended up in one of the facilities.
Especially oaks, especially if you've ever done midsummer, for example, people make oak crowns and they're considered a source of strength. So
probably if you have any doubts about this, you are very well recommended to contact your local authorities, the local municipality, and they will have the ability to consult you on this.
So one story which we've been covering off and on for quite some time now, I don't even know how, probably the entire time of the show, is about the mandatory procurement component, or OIK in Latvian, OIK. And this is, as we've talked about, we will not get into massive details right now, but this is Otto can explain.
Yeah. So apparently a person who has been involved in trying to cheat the OIK system, probably by pretending to co-generate this renewable energy as the scheme would intend, he has been, or she has been, the person has been found guilty and is to serve 3-year jail sentence. So one sentence from my part is that for the 20% of my electricity bill that me and other people of Latvia have to pay towards OIK, I think we share a very happy sentiment about this.
Because this was intended to help increase, renewable energy usage here in Latvia, but what it did was increase the amount of people pretending to make renewable energy and grifting people, unfortunately. So that is moving forward. So now this is important for drivers out there. Okay, so apparently there are going to be new fines for driving without the mandatory insurance OCTA. And these fines are going to be increased. So what can you recommend people do if they are driving here in Latvia?
So if you drive, especially if you're an expat or a foreigner who comes here and wishes to start driving here, the first thing you have to do is make sure that you get the mandatory vehicle insurance, which is usually found by the abbreviation OCTA, because they are going to increase the fines to a couple of hundreds of euros if you're found driving without it.
And what's great about this car insurance, first of all, is far more affordable than it is. I can only compare with America. I don't know about other countries in the world. And you don't have to buy it for an individual person. You can buy it for the car. So it's not like you have to individually insure everybody who is in the car, which is a very welcome change from the American system, at least. So this one was this hasn't been quite decided yet, but it does look like there is enough support for this to go through. So there is a discussed temporary ban on foreign adoptions that has been supported by the Latvian Seimas, something that we've talked about in the past. This is a measure that has become increasingly popular in a lot of countries throughout the world. I know that Romania has done something like this, Ethiopia has done something like this, and a bunch of other countries. Russia has done this specifically in regards to the United States. But what is the logic behind not allowing foreigners to adopt Latvian children, Otto?
Well, here there are a few concerns, one of them being the demographic concern of not wishing to, let's say, send away Latvian children. The other also being the concern for some cases where you would have like lack of oversight, and these children then being the victims of child abuse and the Latvian authorities being unable to do anything about this. At the same time, we still have several thousands of orphans or children whose parents have given them up for adoption, and I think this is a very important issue that has to be dealt with, and children should get to a family, their own or adopted one, as soon as possible, and I think that would be, in my mind, even more important than other demographic support measures, because first of all we have to take care of the kids that we already have.
Yeah, and I do understand the concern that, once the child leaves Latvia, you can't keep an eye on them. You can't really do anything to protect them anymore. And there were those, high-profile cases, and especially in America, where there was abuse by adoptive parents. But let's be frank for a minute. We also have had horrible amounts of headlines here in Latvia about the orphanage system and the abuses that have happened there. So, yes, we can keep an eye on them here in Latvia, but apparently that has not really helped that much. And orphans are one of the most vulnerable populations here in Latvia. So, I would like to see, okay, if this does go through, then, quite a bit more funding and oversight for the for the orphanage system here in Latvia, and cut down on those abuses as well, definitely. So next, the Constitutional Court has found that support for the elderly and for the disabled is unconstitutionally low. Is this a surprise to you, Otto?
Well, no, it is similar to the previous Constitutional Court decision that we discussed regarding the guaranteed minimum income. So the government will have to find a new formula how to calculate it, because it is, you have it in place. It is not the problem that you have it, but it is the way how it is calculated. And in some cases, these formulas have been stuck back in the 90s. And of course, we understand that if the government increases them, then it has also fiscal impact. But that is something that the Constitutional Court has found that the government has to do.
Because that is part of the Latvian Constitution. So, the Latvian Constitution is not like the American Constitution, which is very short and has just a few articles, and then everything is on top of that. So, it is kind of a different system if you're, wondering, well, why is the Constitutional Court involved in this?
Yeah. So in this regard, you can see the last section of the Latvian Constitution, which specifically deals with human rights and also deals with social issues.
So we will see what happens there, because now the ball is in the government's court to do something about that. Back to drivers for a minute. We probably should have covered this right after we talked about the other driving story. But when you see a red light, that means stop. That does not mean go through. And also be careful when you see a yellow light, because yellow to a lot of us out there means go faster, not slow down. Obviously, if there's a truck behind you, you do have to go faster. And, obviously, if it's, more dangerous to stop than to keep going, you should do that. But, all of us have been in a rush before. All of us have kind of thought I don't see anyone. I don't see any cops. It's 2 a.m. right now and there's nobody around. Should I just... Be very careful of that now, because there is a new system of red light traffic radars, as there are many places throughout the world. We've had these in the United States for quite some time and at quite a few intersections. And these are being tested. Apparently, I haven't heard this confirmed, but I did see some information going around that also in Jelgava, these are being tested as well.
Yeah, I think I saw one on my way from Riga to Jelgava, so probably I wanted to say we won't be safe. Well, probably we'll be safer now that they are also going to be not only in Riga, but also in other cities. So, especially foreign drivers, but also the ones of our own, beware.
Yeah, and apparently, so this is just a pilot project right now, at least according to the story right here. But if it does go forward, then this could be implemented in other places throughout the country. So do beware. Just be careful driving. We're going to talk about Latvian driving in just a minute in a little bit more detail once we get to international stories. So if you're driving to Jurmala, another thing you have to be careful of is the fact that it's not free. You do have to pay in the summer a small fee to be able to drive around the city of Jurmala, at least throughout most of Jurmala. There are sections that you do not have to drive. For example, if you go to Chemeri, which all of you should, then you do have to you don't have to pay this fee. And also like Priedine, which is not over the river Lielupe yet.
But specifically, we are talking about the center of Jurmala, or the seaside that most people would think of when like going to the sea and enjoying the Riga Bay.
Exactly. Now, this is just for the tourism season usually, but there is a plan by the mayor of Jurmala, Gatis Truksnes, who I just cannot believe that he's still the mayor. We have to do an entire episode just about all of the all of the
headlines that he has been into.
Yeah, the illustrious career of Mr. Gatis Truksnes. I really just can't believe I'm reading his name still as the mayor of Jurmala right now, but we'll discuss him at a later date. So apparently they are planning to make this a year-long fee. Which is not very popular for those ārzemnieki who drive to Jurmala from time to time to enjoy the the beautiful tourist attractions there. But apparently, I can understand why city council would want to do this. Do you see going through?
It is possible that it will, because on the one hand we could understand the Jurmala City Council. You would have both the environmental consideration, that you do not want like so many cars, and let's say this increased air pollution in a city which makes most of its money out of tourism. At the same time, it is also an issue of parking, because there is also not so many places where you can park the car in the center. On the other hand, you can also understand that many people, especially people with means, would prefer to go there by car. So it is a great additional revenue for the city. On the one hand, I could understand the frustration of many people, including also like people from Jelgava who would go there by car. On the other hand, well, driving is not a right, it is more of a privilege, and there are other ways how to reach Jurmala. So probably if they are going to vote for this, it will go through, and there's nothing we can do about it.
We can always take the train though.
Yes.
So or the bus if you're completely crazy. But
and we can also recommend you to take your bike or rent a bike and use the very good bike road from Riga to Jurmala, which is also a very good option, especially in the summer.
Yes, some sad news now. So we had two very tragic deaths this week, and one was Mr. Pauls Bankovskis, who is an author who Liga, our literature critic, she actually reviewed one of his books, the book 18, which you can find on latviaweekly.com. But he had an extremely illustrious career, writing scripts for films, short stories, novels. And he died at just the age of 47, which is just a huge loss to the Latvian culture community, as it is, of course, to his family as well. So we wish them the best in this very sad time. And unfortunately, also, Mr. Juris Kronbergs has died as well, a well-known poet and translator. He has died at the age of 73. and he also received the order of 3 stars, from what I understand.
Exactly, because he was most noted for his translations of many Latvian authors in Swedish, so he was among the strongest bridges between Latvia and Sweden culturally.
So two very sad losses, unfortunately. But one good piece of news for Latvian culture is that the new Riga Theatre, Jaunais Rigas Teatris, we've been talking about their problems with their building construction for quite some time. And apparently now, officially, a new group has taken over the construction of the theater. The well-known from this show, if you've listened before, Skonto Buve, Skonto Construction, which we'll see what happens there, because as bad as the original construction company was, Skonto Buve has had its own well-known problems in the past, unfortunately. So we will see what happens there. But apparently, they are planning to open in fall 2022, which I have a very hard time believing is going to happen. But I know they will be very happy to do this, because their temporary home in the old tobacco factory apparently is kind of comically unsuited for their premises. So what do you see? Do you see it opening up in 2020, Otto?
Well,
2022, sorry.
Well, I hope that it opens before Rail Baltica, so I could try to naively put a bet on that. But certainly, I hope that they will go through with this, because certainly the new Riga Theatre is one of the brightest stars of our cultural scene, and I hope that they will get back to normal premises as soon as possible.
Speaking of things that are closed in Riga right now, Terbadas Iela is going to be traffic-free for a month from July 15th, so probably when a lot of you are listening to this, until August 16th. So it is going to be completely devoted to pedestrians and traders and different cultural events. So, this is not completely surprising, because there has been, in the first part of the year, a plan every Saturday to close down, a certain street in the center of Riga, and this looks like a major extension of this. I cannot comment on this really as a non-Riga resident, but Otto, as somebody who lives in Riga, how do you feel about this plan?
Well, I think this is a great idea, because Riga does lack a real pedestrian street. Well, we do have a pedestrian zone in the old town, but at the same time, if you would look at what's in Lithuania, in Poland, in Estonia, in many other places, we really lack this one whole street, which is given to pedestrians and also to street traders, because it would be possible to set up it would be difficult to set up these kind of trading in the narrow streets of the old town. So I think Tarbat Street would be a good choice for that, and would also be probably a good economic measure in trying to get the action back in economy after the COVID events. Because we know that this testing of these streets was part of the plan to understand which street would be better to make a pedestrian one permanently, and perhaps Tarbat Street might be the best choice.
Yeah, I'm not really surprised about that, because, just as somebody who has driven and walked and everything a lot through Riga, Terbatas is not the most important kind of thoroughfare. But I was expecting it was going to be Baroniela, but I guess...
Yeah, well, with Baroniela, you couldn't really do much of the trading there, because you have the tram line. So it would be the question where to put, let's say, the lemonade stands and the fast food stands and stuff like that. So probably they will leave the Baron Street for the traffic, because there's also this difference between the Tarbat Street and the Baron Street, that the Baron Street actually ends up by the Gaisa Tilts, by this viaduct, so it is important for the traffic, whereas Tarbat Street ends up with a dead end at the Artillery Street. Perhaps they will keep the Baron Street open, and then we'll choose the Tarbat Street as the winner of this test.
You have officially sold me that this is the right idea. So, couple last quick stories. If you are looking for a new place to live and you have a euro, then you can buy a wonderful estate, a former manor house, or as we call them in Latvian, moija, over in Vidzeme. It's called the Lielamoja, and it's in the Modliana parish. And the one stipulation, though, unfortunately, is that you do have to prove that you have the capital and will to renovate it. And from the pictures, it is quite the fixer-upper.
Yeah, so you will have to have a lot of will by the pictures, but certainly I think this is a good initiative because it has been an issue what to do with all the manors. At one point in our history, we had over 1,000 manors across the Latvian countryside because, as we discussed in the last show, it was only 100 years ago that aristocracy was abolished. But before that, for approximately 700 years, we did have barons, we did have the crusaders, we had a lot of people who lived in a lot of these, built and lived in a lot of these fancy manors, and now they are empty. Well, some of them have been used as schools, some of them has been used as some municipal administration buildings, but of course they are difficult to keep up, especially if you do not have a lot of resources. Here probably they have got this inspiration from Italy, where we have heard that they are selling these houses in Sicily and Sardinia for €1 if you pledge to invest at least 5,000 in the next couple of years. So I think the plan here is similar, so that also we would not lose this part of our heritage to the how we would say in Latvian, the teeth of time.
Yes, I can't remember what the term is in English for that. It is escaping me, but I do understand the idea. Two last quick stories. So one very interesting thing, I've been thinking about these kind of urban gardens recently, about where in Jelgava they would be good to go, but there is kind of a temporary plan in the territory of the former Sport Palace or Sportopils in Riga. So if you've seen this big kind of empty lot that is fenced off by different gates in the center of Riga, that is probably what we're talking about right here, because it is well known as quite a huge territory, actually. And it has been just kind of fenced off for about 12 years, and there's been different plans to build different housing units there. So in the meantime, because this has been caught up for quite some time now, there is a talk about turning it into a massive kind of urban garden and letting these different kind of activists take it over and make it a big urban garden, which I think is a fantastic idea. I'd love to see more of this all throughout, not just Riga, but also here in Jelgava and in other cities throughout Latvia, because it is just this kind of big, ugly sore in the middle of the center, just doing nothing, and it would be great to turn it into something positive.
I agree, especially that it is a prime property right in the center of Riga, and currently it gives some kind of despondency for this part of the city, and I hope that they will make it something that is more publicly accessible, at least until the time that they actually get the resources to finish building apartments or any other developments that they intended to make there.
And our final story, last but definitely not least, we want to extend a huge congratulations to Miss Ilse Gilde, who has become the first female colonel ranked in the Latvian army, which is a huge achievement for her and is fantastic. So apparently she is the head of the United Staff of the National Armed Forces. So just huge congratulations, Otto. Anything to add?
Exactly. I think that is a good achievement for the army, which also has a significant a part of women who serve there, as we have a professional army, and a number of women have chosen it as their career path. And I'm happy to see that Ms. Gilde has been promoted. I think it is well deserved.
And that does it for domestic stories. So let's hand things over to Olevs to see what he has to talk about for international stories.
Hello in international news of Latvia Weekly. Mr. Andrzej Duda won the Polish presidential election with a slight majority this Sunday, succeeding around 51% over his rival for the post, current mayor of Warsaw, a liberal Rafał Trzaskowski. It was not an easy victory for Mr. Duda, who represents conservative stand in his policies and shows the fact that political fragmentation in Polish society is increasing. Poland plays an important role for economies and security of the Baltic countries. From July 13 to 20, as part of ongoing US military Operation Atlantic Resolve, about 10 Black Hawk helicopters will arrive in Latvia to strengthen regional security. It will be part of a larger movement of US troops with about 60 helicopters in all, who will be stationed at military bases in Latvia, Germany, and Poland. Soldiers of the 101st Combat Aviation Brigade will work alongside Latvia's National Armed Forces at the aviation base at Lielvārde and will train with other NATO troops stationed in Latvia. It's planned that this rotation will stay in Latvia for 9 months. Latvian Defense Minister Artis Pabriks declared readiness to receive US troops for a permanent presence in Latvia. Latvia wants to begin negotiations with the United States on the possible deployment of American forces in Latvia after US President Donald Trump announced the partial withdrawal of troops from Germany. It's important to maintain a significant presence of US forces near the NATO eastern border, so Latvia is ready to host a part of these US troops, also covering the related costs. These are great news that shows Latvia's desire not only be consumer of transatlantic security goods, but also bear certain costs for these benefits. The European Union must prepare for the possibility that the post-Brexit talks on future relations with Great Britain may end without an agreement, German Chancellor Angela Merkel warned recently. Britain left the European Union early this year, and both sides have time until the end of this year to agree on their future relationship. However, in fact, for the new trade agreement and the framework agreement to enter into force on January 1st next year, the negotiating parties must sign it no later than October. And guess what? No remarkable progress has been achieved so far. A powerful Russian nuclear submarine, possibly the Oscar II class submarine Oriole, entered the Baltic Sea Thursday morning last week. The cruise missile submarine entered the Baltic Sea under the Great Belt Bridge, which connects the Danish islands. Russia usually sends only diesel-electric submarines into this area, but the arrival of the Oscar's second submarine will significantly increase the capacity of the Russian Navy in the Baltic Sea. The submarine is expected to take part in the Russian Navy Day Parade on July 26 in St. Petersburg. This underlines once again how important it is to build a credible maritime security for the partnering countries across the Baltic Sea. Insecure, real chaos, and worse cultures than in India, this is how Estonian blogs and online forums describe the Latvian road traffic culture. Estonian magazine Postimees reports that Estonians have expressed great confusion about how drivers in Latvia choose to drive on the side of the road to allow hurried drivers to overtake the third line in the middle of the road. Estonian habit of staying in the middle of the band in Latvia can be forgotten. People with some experience in Latvian driving warn those who plan to drive here. Everything is different there. Keep your eyes open, or otherwise you are going to miss a faster car. Lithuanians have also pointed out that Latvian road traffic culture is completely different among the all Baltic states. As a Latvian driver, I must share completely in these Estonian sentiments. Driving culture in Latvia is something that we should not be proud of.
Thank you very much, Olevs. So, Otto, any comments you would like to make?
Yes, I would probably like to comment on two stories. One being the comment by the Minister of Defense with regard to the stationing of U.S. troops. We did discuss this before the show, as it was quite a big announcement, and we could discuss of how realistic it could actually be, because of course it does not only depend from the wishes or proposals from the Latvian Latvian side, but also the decisions at the American side, which would be the main decision here in this question. But there's certainly an opportunity for this, as the United States are withdrawing part of troops from Germany, and we can see this is not something isolated. We have also seen this call from Poland in trying to get some of these troops also to be stationed there, and perhaps if the minister thinks that if he uses the right approach and the right keywords, such as being willing to pay their share for this, they think that it might work. So I think it's probably not a foregone conclusion yet. What do you think?
I have a very hard time seeing Russia taking this sitting down, because I know that Russia, one of their major grievances has been encroachment, quote unquote, encroachment of their borders by NATO forces. And one of the whole points of making, not these permanent soldiers being put down, but these kind of mobile, rotating forces has been to, at least in, some way allay those concerns. So I don't know. I would be worried that there could be some kind of response from Russia, to this. But I don't know. I have a hard time seeing the current U.S. administration right now wanting to jump into this, because I think moving the troops from Germany has less to do about reshuffling them in other places in Europe, but to show that we're drawing back from Europe. But it's very hard to say what will happen in November, so we will have to sit tight.
Yeah, exactly. And probably the other story that we could touch a little bit is the question of the traffic culture. So probably no wonder that they are introducing the red light cameras there. And as we discussed, it is sometimes with the behavior you see in the traffic, you can discuss whether you can call it a culture. But as we concluded, bacteria is culture as well. So even bad driving can also be part of this culture.
Yeah, culture is not the word I would use for it. It's like just insanity. Okay, that just about does it for the stories of the week. But we have some history that we should discuss. And Otto, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, certainly. So I want for all of us to remember July 16, 1921, which is the time when the Constitutional Assembly approved the National Coat of Arms of Latvia. And let me briefly tell you about the symbols that we can see there. So the 3 stars, similarly as on the Monument of Freedom, represent the historical regions of Latvia. Then you have the sun for freedom and the 17 rays that represent the 17 districts that Latvians inhabited at that time. Then we have the red lion that symbolizes Courland, the historic symbol of the Duchy of Courland, and the silver griffin, which symbolizes both Vidzeme and Latgale. And if you're wondering whether I'm telling the truth, you can just check the former border markers on the way from Jelgava to Riga, somewhere by Uolena. You would have like 2 small obelisks that do symbolize this border between these 2 parts of Latvia at that time, using these symbols. Then at the base of the coat of arms, you can see it being decorated by branches of an oak tree, which, as we discussed today, is a national symbol of Latvia. And I have to recall the legislation, of course, that the usage of the coat of arms is strictly regulated, that all and only public institutions have the small coat of arms in their logo, which helps you understand, like when you receive, let's say, a letter or information from a public institution, it would most likely include the smaller version of the coat of arms.
And how about our look at the future? So what can people do this week, Otto?
Well, certainly, as you could also attest, one may still see the sand sculptures in Jelgava. So despite some rains that we have had, they are still on there, as they have been very well constructed. But another idea, if you're not so much into sand, but into more of flowers, then I can recommend you to visit the Rundale Palace once again to see the Rose Garden, which should be in the top bloom right now. And I will also use the opportunity to take my sister there today. Also, if you are more interested in the stars, then apparently one celestial object that we can observe from Latvia until the end of July is a very large and relatively bright comet titled Neowise, which apparently is well observable, and we have seen these pictures in the media and also in the social media feeds of our friends.
And for a place to visit over the summer, we've been suggesting some different various vacationing spots. I would like to recommend the town of Roja, which is another. Roja and Pavlosta are my two favorite seaside towns, but Pavlosta is kind of halfway between Liepāja and Ventspils, whereas Roja is somewhere like halfway between Jūrmala and Kolka. So it is in the Riga Bay, and it is a very cool little town. There's a really cool arts community there as well. There's some different festivals that happen there, so it is definitely worth checking out. I think that just about does it for this week, Otto. So yeah, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you to Andrew and Carlos for keeping our Facebook page up to date, and thank you, Otto, for enjoying some decaf with me and talking about the news.
Yeah, thank you. This was great. Visu labu.
Until next time, visu labu visiem.